I have an official announcement to make on behalf of the Personal Trainers of America. Functional training is dead. Find out why next. Welcome back to the Personal Trainer Playbook, where today we are talking about the death, the demise, the destruction of functional training. I think the big deal with functional training to me, and why I hate the phrase so much, is I don't know what the fuck it means. And neither do you, and neither do the people saying it, because it really has no definition. What is function? What is the actual function that we are trying to improve with a specific exercise, workout routine, whatever it is? No one is able to give a clear definition. Therefore, it's a bullshit phrase. And today I'm putting it to bed forever. It's never coming back. It went away in the 70s and 80s. It came back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And like most things in fitness, it started with, pretty good intentions. It started kind of out of the rehab space where, people were trying to, I think it was a little bit of a pushback to the bodybuilding era of the 80s and 90s, where when people thought about exercise, all they thought about was big juiced up bodybuilders, and all they were doing was using machines. They weren't doing a lot of free weight exercises, and they kind of moved like refrigerators. So they weren't the best example of how to use physical fitness to improve not only your muscularity, but also your health. And so this functional fitness era came out of that. And again, I hate it because it's not clearly defined, but it also, for a lot of people, it just does not give them the best results, and it does not match up the effort they're putting in with what they expect to get in terms of their body adapting. Okay. So today I want to go through what I think a functional exercise is, and then go through some of the functional exercises, quote unquote, functional exercises that are out there that you see on the interwebs that people are doing in gyms randomly, tell you why they are bad, and tell you what you can do instead with your clients to get better results. All right. So like, for instance, this dipshit on the Bosu ball here doing a pike. Now, in all seriousness, that's actually not a bad exercise. It's actually a pretty good abdominal exercise to pike on a Bosu ball. That's not even a Bosu ball. On a, what do you call those? A physio ball. So he's doing a pike on a physio ball, whatever. It's actually not a bad exercise. But the biggest thing with functional training that we will see is the lack of balance that involves most functional, quote, functional training exercises, and how that does not benefit you from a training perspective. If you've liked this video, check out the link in the description for my 30-day email series on how to make more money as a personal trainer. Click the link, get in there today. So let's go through why most, quote, functional movements suck. Really, it comes from the instability that a lot of functional movements provide. Now, this can be anything with unstable surface training. It could be doing anything on a half Bosu ball that you're wiggling around like you've got Parkinson's disease and you just can't stop shaking. And really what happens when your body is in an unstable environment, specifically unstable surface environment, it is going to ramp down your central nervous system so that you cannot produce that much force. Now, why does it do that? It does that as a protective mechanism. It knows you are in an unsafe environment, standing on a Bosu ball. So it's trying to ramp down the amount of force you can produce to keep you from hurting yourself. There have been studies on this that show you are just not able to produce the same amount of force on an unstable surface. Your central nervous system does not fire. The synapses do not fire the same way they do when you're on a stable surface. Okay, so that's number one, and it's by far the most important thing. Number two, low loads, the ones that you would typically need to use for, quote, functional exercises, do not stimulate type 2 muscle fibers the way you would need them to in order to get bigger and stronger. So the type 1 muscle fibers are the slower twitch, less explosive, less capacity for growth fibers. Your body is going to utilize those fibers until you force them to use the type 2 or fast twitch fibers. The way you do that is by lifting really heavy things or lifting things really quickly or explosively. both of which are very difficult to do with this quote functional training and again, we're really talking about unstable surface training. You can't move very fast because you're going to fall on your face. You can't move anything heavy because you're going to fall on your face. So you are not able to stimulate type 2 fibers. This is a huge deal because you will not get bigger and you will not get stronger if you cannot stimulate type 2 fibers. Number 3, this is one that I think is pretty underrated that most people don't consider, and that it is cognitive demand for quote unquote functional unstable training, whatever you want to call it, is really, really high. Meaning your brain is doing a lot just to get you to execute the exercise. So there's a lot of bandwidth that's being used just for the execution of the exercise. You always want to think, can I make this exercise as simple as fucking possible so that all my brain has to think is to push with my legs, push with my arms, whatever it is, to produce the muscular force needed to complete the rep or complete the set. If you're thinking about, am I going to fall over? What's my proprioception? Where am I in space? All those things, they can be useful for certain things, certain different times of exercises, but for strength and power and muscle growth, it is not what you want. So you do not want the cognitive demand to be high. You want it to be low in those situations. Number 4, most functional exercises cannot be loaded, tracked, or progressed easily. So the biggest one for me on this is something like a TRX or a suspension system. Yeah, you can do TRX rows and TRX push-ups all you want. Those are going to be hard to progress over time, and it's going to be hard to track your progress. I guess you could slap on a weight vest. I guess you could elevate your feet. You can do something like that. But sometimes it's just easier to pick up a heavier dumbbell or do some more reps or put an extra plate on the bar. That's just an easier way to track progress and an easier way to progress week over week so that you're actually utilizing progressive overload, you're getting bigger and you're getting stronger. Number 5, some functional movements don't even fucking, resemble the real world movements they're, purportedly trying to improve. When would you ever squat with on a BOSU ball or squat on something that is unstable with a bar on your back? You never would. So the argument is that you're preparing your body for an unstable environment. So let's say you're walking down the street and you hit a wrong step or you miss a step on the way down. You're preparing your body for that. That's different than training under an unstable circumstance. You don't want to unnecessarily put your body in those positions or those situations unless you really need to. And in this case, not only do you really not need to, it's not beneficial. So if these kinds of movements suck, what actually makes an exercise functional? Again, this is going to go back to what is the definition of function? What is the context here? If you have Betty Sue from, HR who's 80 years old and she wants to add muscle mass to her frame because she's getting a little bit weak in her older age and she's losing muscle mass because she's postmenopausal and all these things that older women go through. The function is just muscularity to be able to move her bones. That's all that you really care about is muscle mass function. You are not going to add muscle mass by doing lightweight exercises, standing on a BOSU ball, standing on something that's unstable. That will not add muscle mass. So in that context, it is not functional. So in my opinion, a functional exercise is going to target a specific muscle group, or a movement pattern or some sort of fitness quality if you're talking more in the conditioning realm. So let's take that one by one. A specific muscle. If you want to have a bigger chest, then if that exercise doesn't specifically target your chest, it's not matching the function of what you want. Same thing with the muscle group, hamstrings, legs, you can use any muscle group. Movement patterns is a little different because you might not say, I'm looking to build muscle on my chest. You might say, I'm looking to improve my overhead pressing, or I'm looking to improve my squatting pattern. Then you would want to do something that is specific to that pattern. And fitness quality might go towards something a little bit more conditioning based. So let's say you want to improve your heart rate variability or your heart rate recovery, then you need to do something specific to that quality. Now, it allows also for continued and progressive loading. One of the worst things about, quote unquote functional movements is that they don't allow them. They're not easy to be loaded. TRX is a great example. We need to load things in order for your body to adapt. You can load yourself with body weight. It's possible. You can put yourself in different positions where you're utilizing gravity and you're utilizing extra range of motion. That is possible. But sometimes it's just fucking easier to add some weight to the bar or add a heavier dumbbell. Number 3, a functional exercise allows the target tissue or tissues or qualities to be the rate limiter. This is really important. Well, what does that mean? That means in order for an exercise to be functional, whatever makes you fatigue first is what's getting trained the most. So if you want to do an exercise that trains your quads, you want your quads to fatigue first and be the reason that you need to stop that set. So this is where functional exercises, again, drop the ball, because in functional exercises where you're out in space, you might be on an unstable surface, the first thing that fails, usually with most people, is balance, coordination, or just mental bandwidth. They can't keep up the act or the ability to execute the movement. So that's why they fail. And in this situation, the muscles or the movement patterns do not adapt because they do not get trained close enough to failure. So if you're squatting on a Bosu ball, very, very rarely is it your quads that give out first. It's the balance demand, it's the coordination, it's the mental bandwidth of having to execute a difficult exercise that's not only difficult, but stupid. Number 4, if it involves high force production, we want it to be stable. Like I mentioned earlier, if the goal is to produce force for either gaining strength or gaining muscle mass, you want the most stable environment possible that allows your nervous system to ramp up as high as it can, and it also reduces the cognitive demand so that all you need to focus on is pushing weight. And number 5, if it involves movement quality, it is simple. So movement quality could be a goal. It could be what you're seeking for function. And it could be something where it's a single leg, it's a single arm, it's something where you're working on your gait pattern, whatever that is. If that's the case, you're going to lose a little bit of stability, but we want to keep simplicity. We do not want overcomplicated exercises because that's what's going to take up extra mental bandwidth. And that's what's going to make an exercise go from a pretty good one to a mediocre one at best. All right, so let's go through some of the exercises I hate. Let's substitute the ones I like instead and tell you why they are better. So number 1, we've talked about it ad nauseum, Bosu ball squats. Again, this is standing on a Bosu ball or standing on an unstable surface, squatting with, God help you, a bar on your back or dumbbells in your hand, whatever it is. And again, this is going to ramp down force production, ramps down the central nervous system. It's definitely dangerous because the odds of you falling are very high, at least much higher than on a stable surface. You can't load them very heavy, again, because of what we talked about. And your legs are not the rate limiter. They are not the limiting factor. They will not fatigue first. Therefore, they are not getting trained the most. What to do instead? RFE, rear foot elevated split squats. So if functional is what you're looking for, then a lot of times a great alternative to unstable surface training is single leg unilateral training on a stable surface. Now, you're using one leg at a time, so you're getting a little bit of that balance and coordination demand and also the stabilization of your hip when you're on one leg, which is what needs to happen when you walk or run. But in this particular setup, we can still get a lot of force production because you technically have both feet on something that is stable. Your front foot is on the ground, your back foot is on a bench or on a roller or whatever it is. But this is a hard exercise that's going to challenge your coordination and also challenge the stability of that hip. You can still load these relatively heavy, especially if you load both arms. So if you put a bar on your back, that you can load these pretty heavy and that's pretty stable. If you put a dumbbell in each hand, that's going to be pretty stable because you're balanced on both sides. You can add a little bit less stability by adding one dumbbell. You can add even less stability by adding the dumbbell to the working side leg. So if you have your left leg in front, you put the dumbbell in your left hand only. This is going to, offset you a little bit so you're not counterbalanced on the other side. This is a great, great way to work on quote unquote balance and coordination and function without being stupid about it and while still getting a training stimulus for your legs. All right. RFE split squat, higher force, easier to load, balance is still challenged. Number 2, TRX push-ups. I gotta admit, I kind of hate the TRX. It's not that it's bad. It's just, to me, there's so many better options of things to do in a gym, because for TRX, again, it's not easy to load. It's not easy to progress. And it kind of puts you into some awkward positions, especially with push-ups. They're hard to progress. Like I said, they can cause discomfort in the shoulder joint because you're fundamentally changing the movement pattern of the push-up when you're able to move the arms in and out. So it's kind of like you're mixing a fly and a push-up position. And that, if you get the arms back here, that can put the shoulder joint in a little bit of a funky position. So I just don't like doing TRX push-ups, and most of the time I just avoid them. And what can you do instead? Well, there's something called a chaos push-up. A chaos push-up is when you take a band, like a thicker band, and you kind of line it up across from a rig. So you put it in the J hooks, like you would for a bar for a bench press, and you do push-ups on top of the band. This is it's going to provide something called perturbation, which is really just these little tiny disturbances every time the band wiggles back and forth. What your body needs to do is it needs to learn how to rebalance or kind of recalculate their balance demands every time there's a perturbation, which is going to be every time you drop down into the push-up. So this is great for shoulder stability. It's great because it still retains the movement pattern of the push-up without getting too goofy with it. But it does have you kind of shaking all over the place, not as stupid as standing on a Bosu ball. But if you do this with clients, they're going to notice right away these are much, much harder than normal push-ups, and it's going to challenge them in a much different way. So they can progress and regress this easily. You just use a different band, or you can even lower it or lift it in the rack to make it easier or harder. And again, because of perturbation, this is going to make this a great balance challenge and a great exercise for proprioception. Number 3, we've hit it on in a bunch, but we'll reiterate it one more time. Unstable surface anything training blows. It just fucking blows. It does not do what people think it does, okay? Training on an unstable surface does not improve your balance. It does not improve your coordination. It ramps down your nervous system. It ramps down the amount of force you can produce, and it just does not do what you think it's doing. So what could you do instead? I know this isn't a very specific thing, unstable surface, anything, but if you're going to do something like a hinge or a deadlift on an unstable surface, which is bananas, do this instead. Do a cable single leg RDL. Again, much like the rear foot elevated split squat, you can regress and progress this in a lot of different ways. You can have something in your offhand to hold on to make it more balanced. You can be out in space, which would make it the hardest version. But the cable provides constant tension as you're shooting that opposite hip back. And it allows you to work on that hinging pattern while still having to stabilize the hip because you are on one leg. This is what you think you're getting with unstable surface training, but you're getting it with both feet, well, one foot on the ground, the other foot in space, but you're getting a stability challenge while still being able to provide a adaptation for your body and get it to be bigger and stronger. This is the best of both worlds. Unstable surface training is the worst. Stop doing it. Your clients will thank you. You won't look like an idiot. You'll thank me later. All right. This has been the Personal Trainer Playbook. Again, click the link down below for the 30-day email series on how to make more money as a personal trainer. I'll see you next time, and check out these videos for more. Beep, 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 boop, bop, beep, 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 boop, boop, boop.